There are over 900 ghost towns hiding across Texas right now, and in dozens of them, the mail simply stopped coming, and nobody outside ever noticed. No news story, no goodbye, just an empty post office and silence. Some were wiped off the map by killer hurricanes. Some got left behind when the railroad chose another town instead. Others just faded, house by house, until one final letter sat unclaimed forever. Today we're counting down 12 of the most forgotten towns in Texas history, and the exact day the mail stopped. Stick around till the end, because number 1 will genuinely give you chills. Let's get into it. Number 12, Click. Texas, tucked into the Texas Hill Country in Llano County, Click was never a big town, but it had heart. It was named after an early settler, Malachi Click, who put down roots here in the 1880s and gave the place its offbeat one-word name. At its peak, Click was home to about 20 residents, a handful of families who built a small but tight-knit farming community southeast of the town of Llano. In 1880, the town got its own post office, with Benjamin F. Lowe appointed as the very first postmaster. For decades, that little post office was the heartbeat of Click, the one place tying these families to the outside world. But small hill country communities like Click were fragile. There was no booming industry, no railroad depot, nothing to anchor real growth. As nearby towns modernized and roads improved, families slowly drifted away in search of better opportunities, schools, and jobs. Then World War II hit, and like so many small American towns, Click lost the one thing keeping it alive on paper: its post office. Sometime during the war years, the Click post office was permanently discontinued, and with that, mail delivery to this tiny hill country community came to an end for good. Today, Click barely exists as anything more than a name on an old map and a scattering of rural homes along a county road. There's no downtown, no surviving business, nothing to signal a town ever stood here. Just quiet ranchland where a post office once connected 20 people to the rest of Texas. It's a small, quiet start to our list, but it's proof that even the tiniest towns leave a paper trail before they disappear completely. Number 11, Coldwater, Texas. Way up in the Texas Panhandle in Sherman County sat a town that once held real power: Coldwater. Founded on a ranch owned by William B. Slaughter, son of legendary cattle baron C.C. Slaughter, Coldwater wasn't just another dusty settlement. From 1889 to 1901, it was the official county seat of Sherman County, meaning this was the place where local government, justice, and business all revolved around. By 1891, Coldwater had grown enough to support a hotel, a courthouse, a jail, and a mercantile store, everything a frontier town needed to feel permanent. 2 years later, the town even got its own newspaper, the Sherman County Banner, giving residents a voice and a sense of identity on the vast, empty Panhandle Plains. For a while, it looked like Coldwater was going to be a lasting fixture on the Texas map. But status as a county seat can be a fragile thing. As nearby towns grew and railroads shifted the flow of people and commerce, Coldwater began losing its grip on importance. Eventually, the county seat itself was moved elsewhere, stripping Coldwater of the very thing that made it matter. Without that government anchor, businesses closed and families packed up and left. In 1907, the post office shut its doors for good, cutting off the last official lifeline connecting Coldwater to the rest of the world. A brick building on the old ranch limped on as a community church until 1940, but even that finally went quiet. Today, Coldwater isn't a town at all. It's the site of a gas field, the ground beneath it now valued for what's underground, not who once lived above it. Number 10, Knoxville, Texas. Deep in East Texas, straddling the line between Cherokee and Smith counties, Knoxville started with a simple promise: land and opportunity. In the late 1840s, settlers from Tennessee packed up their lives and moved west, carrying the name of their home state's capital with them as they built a new community from scratch. For a while, that promise held true. The town grew steadily, and by 1854, Knoxville was thriving enough to earn its own post office, a clear sign that this was becoming a real, permanent settlement, not just a temporary camp. Families put down roots, businesses opened, and Knoxville looked like it was on track to become one of the lasting towns of East Texas. But in the 1800s, a town's fate often came down to one brutal factor: the railroad. When rail lines were being planned through the region in the early 1870s, Knoxville needed that track to run through its heart to survive. Instead, the railroad bypassed the town completely, choosing the nearby community of Troop instead. That single decision changed everything. Almost overnight, businesses that depended on rail traffic and shipping began packing up and relocating to Troop, chasing the trains and the opportunity they brought. Families followed soon after, unwilling to be left behind in a town with no economic future. By 1875, the writing was on the wall, and Knoxville's post office officially closed its doors. Without mail service, without a railroad, and without residents, Knoxville quickly became a ghost town, swallowed back up by the East Texas pines. Today, almost nothing marks where it once stood. Just another town erased by a train that never showed up. Number 9. Pittsville, Texas. Just outside modern-day Katy, in what's now Fort Bend and Waller County, Pittsville was a town built on good timing that eventually ran out. Founded in the mid-1800s, Pittsville grew into a modest but functioning community, complete with its own post office, which opened in 1870. For a small Texas settlement, that was a big deal. It meant families here were officially connected to the rest of the state, able to send letters, receive news, and feel like part of something bigger than a handful of scattered homes. But Pittsville's fate was sealed by a decision made somewhere else entirely. When the San Antonio and Aransas Pass Railroad was built through the region, planners chose to route the tracks through nearby Fulshear instead of Pittsville. In the 1800s, that was almost a death sentence. Railroads meant trade, travel, and growth, and towns without a station quickly became towns without a future. One by one, families and businesses in Pittsville packed up and moved closer to the tracks in Fulshear, chasing the opportunity the railroad brought with it. By 1889, it was over. Pittsville's post office officially closed, cutting the town's last real connection to the outside world. Yet somehow, a handful of stubborn residents held on for decades. It wasn't until 1947 that the very last people finally left Pittsville behind, for good. Today, according to Texas historians, almost nothing remains to prove Pittsville ever existed. Just an old abandoned cistern and a small clump of trees sitting quietly off FM 359. A whole community, reduced to concrete and shade. Number 8. Monte Cristo, Texas. Down in the Rio Grande Valley in Hidalgo County, a town rose out of pure ambition in 1909. Monte Cristo was founded by the Mulatto Land Company of Houston, and for a brief moment, it had everything a booming Texas town needed. There was a railroad siding to move goods, a post office to connect residents, a hotel for visitors, general stores for supplies, and farm families ready to work the land and build a future in the valley. On paper, Monte Cristo looked like the next big success story of South Texas. But the desert doesn't care about ambition. The land promoters had sold settlers on rich farmland and easy water, but reality hit fast and hard. A well drilled to supply the town simply failed, leaving Monte Cristo without a reliable water source, a fatal flaw for any farming community in South Texas. Then, between 1915 and 1916, the border region grew dangerous, with violent border raids sweeping through the area and terrifying the very families the town needed to survive. Between no water and constant fear for their safety, residents began abandoning Monte Cristo almost as fast as they'd arrived. By 1920, it was over. The post office, once a symbol of the town's bright future, closed its doors for the final time, officially marking Monte Cristo's collapse. What started as a bold Houston-backed investment ended as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the best-laid plans could crumble fast in unforgiving South Texas land. Today, Monte Cristo exists only in old land records and history books, one of the valley's quietest and most forgotten failures. Number 7. Medicine Mound, Texas. In the far reaches of Hardeman County, near a set of sacred hills once used by the Comanche and Kiowa for ceremonies and gatherings, a little town rose in the shadow of history. Founded in 1884, when the Fort Worth and Denver City Railway pushed through the area, Medicine Mound grew fast and grew strong. By the late 1880s, it had blossomed into a genuinely prosperous community, home to a few hundred residents and around 22 businesses, an impressive number for such a remote stretch of Texas. Fertile land drew in farmers and cattle ranchers, and the railroad meant this wasn't some isolated outpost. It was a real crossroads of commerce, shipping local produce out to distant markets. For a while, Medicine Mound felt untouchable, a town with a genuine future ahead of it. Then, in 1932, disaster struck. A massive fire tore through the town, destroying many of its buildings and gutting the heart of its business district in one violent night. Medicine Mound never fully recovered. Slowly, the businesses that once defined the town began shutting down one by one. The final blows came in the 1950s, when the school, the post office, and the local gym all closed within a short span of each other. The post office specifically shut its doors in 1951, severing the town's last real connection to the outside world. By the 1960s, most of the remaining residents had either passed away or simply moved on, leaving Medicine Mound to the elements, with no infrastructure, no economy, and no reason left for anyone to stay. Number 6. Lobo, Texas. Out in the harsh, beautiful emptiness of Culberson County in far west Texas, a town named after wolves fought hard to survive, and almost made it. Lobo started as a stop along the Southern Pacific Railroad, sitting near the only dependable water source for miles, the Van Horn Wells. By 1907, it had earned its own post office, named for the Mexican wolves that once roamed the surrounding desert. 2 years later, a full town site was laid out, with promoters advertising artesian wells and a grand hotel to lure in settlers. There was just one problem. Those promises were mostly lies. Furious buyers had to take legal action just to force the promoters to actually build what they'd advertised. Still, against the odds, Lobo grew into a real little community, with doctors, cattle breeders, a general store, and even ambitions of becoming the county seat in 1911, though it ultimately lost that fight to nearby Van Horn. Then nature turned on Lobo. In 1929, and again in 1931, powerful earthquakes rocked the region, destroying the town's hotel and rattling residents' confidence in this remote outpost. By the 1930s, the population had dropped to just 10 people. In 1942, the post office finally closed, marking the town's slow slide toward abandonment. Remarkably, Lobo refused to fully die, limping along through mica mining and irrigation farming for decades. But by 1991, the last hopeful chapter ended, and Lobo became a true ghost town. Today, this desert community, once bought outright by German investors, sits empty under the vast West Texas sky. Number 5. Terlingua, Texas. Deep in the rugged desert of Brewster County, right on the edge of Big Bend, Terlingua was built on something dangerous, silvery, and incredibly valuable: mercury. In the late 1800s, cinnabar, the ore used to extract quicksilver, was discovered in the area, and by 1899, the town had earned its own post office. As demand for mercury exploded, fueled by its use in detonators, explosives, and mining processes, Terlingua transformed into a booming industrial town of over 2,000 residents. The Chisos Mining Company, led by Chicago businessman Howard Perry, became the driving force behind the town, eventually building a hotel, a company store, an ice plant, a school, and even a movie theater. For a moment, Terlingua looked like the future of West Texas industry. But mercury towns lived and died by demand, and after World War I, prices crashed hard. Through the 1930s, mining operations slowed, then stalled completely. In 1942, the Chisos Mining Company filed for bankruptcy, and a successor company limped along until the end of World War II, when it too shut down for good. Most of the population scattered almost overnight, leaving behind empty homes, an empty schoolhouse, and an empty post office. Terlingua sat abandoned for decades, a true desert ghost town. But its story didn't end there. In the late 1960s and 70s, tourism slowly breathed life back into the ruins, and the town became famous for its wild annual chili cook-off, eventually crowned the chili capital of the world. Today, Terlingua stands as Texas's most visited ghost town, a haunting mix of abandoned history and modern reinvention. Number 4. Glenrio, Texas. Straddling the border between Texas and New Mexico, along the legendary Route 66, sits one of the strangest ghost towns in America, Glenrio. Founded in 1903 as a simple railroad siding, the town took its unusual name from the English word Glen and the Spanish word Rio, even though it sat in neither a valley nor along a river. What made Glenrio truly bizarre was its location, split perfectly by a state line. The railroad depot and gas station sat on the Texas side, since Texas had cheaper fuel, while the post office, bars, and motels sat on the New Mexico side, since Deaf Smith County, Texas was completely dry. For decades, this odd arrangement made Glenrio a genuine roadside empire, home to diners, motels, and gas stations serving thousands of Route 66 travelers every single day, including the famous First and Last Motel in Texas. Then, in 1973, Interstate 40 was built, and it bypassed Glenrio entirely. Almost instantly, the traffic that had kept this town alive for 50 years simply vanished. The railroad depot had already closed in 1955, and now the highway business followed right behind it. Families packed up, businesses boarded their windows, and one by one, the lights went out along old Route 66. By 1984, even the post office finally closed, cutting the last official thread connecting Glenrio to the outside world. Today, 17 historic buildings still stand frozen in time, faded signs, crumbling motel rooms, and an empty diner, earning Glenrio a spot on the National Register of Historic Places. A ghost town literally caught between two states. Number 3. Thurber, Texas. In the rolling hills of Erath County, one Texas town didn't just grow, it exploded, becoming one of the most powerful industrial company towns in the entire state. Founded in 1888, Thurber sat on rich deposits of bituminous coal, and under the control of the Texas and Pacific Coal Company, it ballooned to over 10,000 residents at its peak. This wasn't some sleepy rural settlement. Thurber had electricity before most Texas towns, brick factories, an opera house, and streets buzzing with immigrant miners from across the world. For decades, Thurber practically ran itself as its own self-contained empire, powering railroads across the Southwest with its coal. But everything changed when locomotives began switching from coal to oil. Almost overnight, the very industry that built Thurber began quietly killing it. The company's oil discoveries elsewhere shifted focus away from coal completely, and by the late 1920s, mining operations began shutting down one by one. The brick plant closed in 1931. The company store liquidated its stock in 1933. Schools consolidated with nearby Strawn in 1935 as enrollment collapsed. Then, on October 28, 1936, the final blow landed. Thurber's post office officially closed for good, symbolizing the true death of the town. Historians consider that single closure the moment Thurber stopped being a town at all. Homes were dismantled, water and gas lines ripped from the ground, and within a year, the site was almost completely abandoned. Today, only a handful of residents remain near the eerie brick ruins and towering smokestack, a ghostly reminder along Interstate 20 of a company town that once powered all of Texas, until it simply didn't. Number 2. Siluria, Texas. On the Texas Gulf Coast, where Calhoun and Matagorda counties meet the open water, a once thriving port town met an enemy it could never defeat: the sea itself. Siluria grew as a coastal settlement, benefiting from its position along the water, welcoming ships, trade, and the steady rhythm of Gulf Coast commerce. For a time, it seemed like just another promising Texas port, one of many small towns riding the wave of maritime trade along the coastline. But sitting at sea level on the Texas Gulf Coast has always come with a brutal risk, and Siluria's luck eventually ran out. In 1875, a massive hurricane tore through the region, devastating the town and shattering the sense of security its residents had built their lives around. Homes were destroyed, businesses crippled, and families left questioning whether Siluria could ever recover. Somehow, the town limped forward, but the damage had already changed everything. Then, in 1886, a second, even more destructive hurricane slammed into the coast, delivering the final blow Siluria simply couldn't survive. With the town in ruins for a second time, residents finally gave up rebuilding altogether. Around 1891, the post office officially closed its doors, quietly confirming what the storms had already decided: Siluria was finished. Families scattered inland, chasing safer ground and new opportunities elsewhere along the Texas coast. Today, almost nothing remains to prove Siluria ever existed. Just another Gulf Coast community erased by the very water that once gave it life. A haunting reminder of how fragile coastal towns can be against nature's fury. Number 1. Indianola, Texas. And now, the town Texas historians call the Queen of Ghost Towns. A story so dramatic it changed how an entire state builds its coastal cities. In the mid-1800s, Indianola wasn't just a town. It was Texas's second-busiest port, a booming gateway where thousands of German immigrants first set foot in America. With over 5,000 residents at its peak, Indianola had hotels, churches, banks, even camels once landed on its docks as part of a bizarre military experiment. This was a true Texas powerhouse, prosperous, ambitious, and seemingly unstoppable. Then, on September 16, 1875, everything changed in a single night. A monstrous hurricane slammed into the coast with 110-mile-an-hour winds, killing up to 300 people and nearly wiping Indianola off the map completely. Somehow, the survivors rebuilt, refusing to let their town die. But fate wasn't finished. On August 19, 1886, an even more violent hurricane struck, this time bringing fire along with the flood, destroying what little remained. This time, there was no rebuilding. Residents finally abandoned Indianola for good, and the county seat was moved to Port Lavaca. On October 4, 1887, the post office closed its doors forever, and officials didn't just close it quietly, they publicly declared the entire town dead. Today, most of original Indianola sits underwater, swallowed by the very bay that once made it powerful, with only a lonely marker standing where a thriving city used to be. 2 hurricanes, hundreds of lives lost. One devastating lesson that would later save Galveston. Indianola's death remains the single most dramatic ghost town story in all of Texas history. From hurricanes that swallowed whole cities to railroads that quietly erased towns off the map, these 12 stories all end the same way, with a post office closing its doors and mail simply stopping. No goodbye, no headline, just silence where a community used to be. And here's the unsettling part. Texas still has hundreds more forgotten towns like these, slowly disappearing, waiting for someone to remember they ever existed. So which of these 12 hit you the hardest? Was it Indianola's brutal double hurricane story, or Glenrio's eerie ghost town frozen right on the state line? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you love uncovering forgotten history like this, make sure you subscribe, because we're just getting started on Texas's darkest, strangest, and most forgotten places. Thanks for watching till the very end. I'll see you in the next one.